Hi, I'm Tamsin. I edit under the name Dr. Thneed on Wikipedia projects and Wikidata. And I'm talking about the New Zealand Thesis project, which is a project to upload data for a large batch of New Zealand theses into Wikidata. And I'm going to describe the progress we've made by July 2022. On the Wikipedia project page, which I'll give a link to later, there is some background to people that don't know where this project started. So I will be running through the a typical Wikidata item, how it links to other things. Some viewers are going to be more familiar with Wikidata than others, and some of the links on Wikidata are not obvious. I'll then look at some tools that we've got for looking at and improving the data, and then what's coming next in the thesis project. So what have we done? We took data, which was 66,000 odd dissertations. We put them all into Wikidata, having removed some duplicates for items that were at more than one institution, or that were possibly in a repository more than once. About 6,500 of the theses have been matched to an author so far, which means that the other 60,000 have gone in with an author name string statement instead. And that's important to remember when we look at some visualizations later, when they're working on data that's attached to people rather than a thesis. They're only working off 6,500 people. So there's a lot of room for us to improve that data. So far, I've added advisor information to about 1,600 of the theses, and I'm continuing to work on that. It's a little bit harder than it is for authors, as I often only have an initial and a surname for an advisor. And whilst in the context of an individual university, you know, in a particular department at a particular time, that makes sense. We've got data that spans more than 100 years and a whole country, and J. Smith can take a bit of work to track down. We've returned the QIDs back to librarians to put back into repositories, and hopefully that's been a smooth process. So let's have a look at a typical item, but actually I'm going to start first on Wikipedia, because the genesis of this project was trying to get more citations for the dissertations on Wikipedia, so that the work is more accessible to people. All right, so here is the Wikipedia page for someone who has got data in the project, and you will find a thesis cited a couple of places on this page. That's not always the case, but here we have the thesis in the info box, and the title is linked directly through a URL to the repository. And we are given a year. These are things that the Wikipedia editor will have entered into the info box directly. Whereas this citation over here in the text, this is the thesis being used to support the statement about what the title and the level of the qualification was. So this citation here is running from the Wikidata item. So we get the author name and a year, we get a title. The research space at Auckland is the repository name, and they're the publisher of the metadata. There's a handle item, which links again to the repository. And then there's a Wikidata QID, which links to the Wikidata item. And just to note that if this thesis had been digitized, we would have been able to put another statement into the Wikidata item saying full work available at URL. And in that case, Wikipedia would know to link this title directly to the repository as well. So if you see linked titles, that's what that means. You can expect a digitized item at the end. So if we want to get from the Wikipedia page to the Wikidata item behind it, you need to look at the menu on the left. And here we go, Wikidata item. And we click on this, it will take us to the Wikidata item for the person, because we were looking at a biographical page. Every Wikipedia page has an item behind it, some more detailed than others. So in this case, this is a Wikidata item for a person. instance of human, we actually have an image, a whole bunch of statements, including field of work, employer, position held, full professor in this case, educated at statement, academic degree statement, and then a link to the thesis with a qualifier that tells us this is a doctoral thesis. The qualifiers are quite useful when someone's done multiple theses so that you can know which one you're going to. We also have statements about doctoral advisor for her, and then also her own doctoral students. There's about 10 here, but there's actually 20 odd more in the thesis data set that we've got. But until we've linked their thesis to the people items in Wikidata, we can't add them. We also have award received. And then one statement I want to draw your attention to is on the focus list of Wikimedia project, NZ thesis project. And what this statement allows us to do is to easily find all of the items we've created or edited or are interested in, so that it makes the searches a bit easier for some of the tools that I'll show you in a minute. And then for this particular person, there's a whole bunch of identifiers at the bottom. They're not always there. One thing I do want to show you for people who are not that familiar with Wikidata is, again, in this left-hand menu, there's a watch links here. And if you click that, specifically for academics or anyone that's an author of a publication, you will find that this is where they're linked to their publications. And put down, because there are lots of them down here. If you want to get any kind of visualizations about these publications, a good way to do it, I should have pointed it out on Wikipedia page, is the Scholia button. The Scholia tool runs a lot of different queries straight off Wikidata and will show you a kind of academic profile for someone, including all their co-authors and maps of where people are and their students and the topics they publish on, that sort of thing. It's worth exploring that as a tool. So that's the Wikidata item for a person. Let's take a quick look. Oh, the other thing I should point out, sometimes this is at the top of the page if you have your screen set up in a picture way, and sometimes it's at the bottom. Here it's at the bottom, and this is the link back to Wikipedia. And if this page, or when this page gets translated into other languages, you'll find a whole long list of pages down here in different language Wikipedias. And this is one of the reasons we want to get the citations up, is because when this page gets translated, probably the citations that already exist in the English page will get picked up onto the others, exposing the theses to a much wider audience than they'd otherwise reach. But let's take a look at a typical thesis item, so you can see what that looks like. If I click here, you'll see we have a relatively detailed description. That's to make it easy for humans reading Wikidata to know what they're going to get. When you search using the search box up here in Wikidata, and you pull up an item, it'll show you the label and it'll also show you the description. So you'll know that this isn't a publication in a journal, this is a doctoral thesis and who it's by and so on. And then we have the more machine readable statements that are saying much the same thing. So an instance of a doctoral thesis, in this case, it has a title, it has an author, which is linked, of course, or who is linked rather. We also have kept the original form of the name as it came from the repository data. We have the publisher, which is the repository. We know the institution the thesis was submitted to, country of origin is New Zealand. It has a language, a publication date, and again, it has the statement on the focus list. And then at the bottom, as an identifier, it has the handle ID. So this will take you to the repository. And again, just to repeat, if the thesis has been digitized, I could add full work available URL as an extra statement here. So that's how we look at individual items on Wikipedia and Wikidata. What if we want to look at the data as a whole? I'm going to show you some of the visualizations and tools for that. You can access them through the Wikidata project page. And that is linked from the Wikipedia project page, which you may have already been to. just so you know the difference, the Wikipedia project page has much more text describing the background to the project, why we're doing it, who's involved. It contains some of the slides of the previous presentation, that sort of thing. The Wikidata project page is much more focused on the tools, the Sparql queries, the visualizations, and so on. But I'm just going to take you straight to the Wikidata project page, and let's take a look at some of those. So this is the Wikidata project page. There's a link back to the Wikipedia page here, and there's a link to a mix and match catalogue here. I'll talk about that later. That's a really useful tool we're going to use to improve the quality of the data and to link more of the theses to the people who wrote them. The first dashboard here is just about counting edits. It's because we have some metrics we need to report on to the Wikimedia user group. And so that's its purpose. If you're going to edit any of the items, it'd be really nice. Click on this dashboard link and add yourself using your editor name. It only counts the edits that you make on items with that statement on the focus list of the NZ Thesis project. So things I really want to show you, these also get called dashboards, but they're slightly different. These are property dashboards, and they give us a really nice overview of the data. So this particular one, I'm going to make it slightly smaller so you can see more of it. This one is looking at thesis items within the project, and it's displaying them according to the institution that the thesis was submitted to. And although we have 8 universities and some polytechs that we have data from, we actually have a really long list of institutions here because, of course, sometimes staff members donate a copy of their thesis from previous institutions to a library. So that's quite a long list. So that's what's happening on the left. That's the grouping that we have. And then across the right, it's displaying to us the properties that each of the items have. So every thesis has an instance of statement, instance of doctoral thesis, instance of master's thesis. Every thesis has a title, so 100% down here. A smaller number of theses have an author statement, and a larger number still have an author name string instead. So we'll be looking to hopefully to get this column more blue over time, and this one will go greener. And so on. We have publishers, main subjects, and so on. And this last one over here is the full work available at URL. So you can see we don't know, like lots of the theses have been digitized, but we don't necessarily know which ones. So we haven't been able to put those links on yet. And I can see something funny happened with the language of work or name for Auckland. So that's a really useful way for me to see that there's a problem there to go back and fix. The real value of these property dashboards, though, is not just in visualizing the data, but allowing you to query it. So for instance, if I wanted a list of which of the Auckland theses had been linked to their authors, I can click on this little magnifying glass. Every magnifying glass in the table runs a query for you, and it asks you straight up, do you want all the items with the property set or all the items without? We're going to go with in this instance. If we said without, we'll get all the ones with name strings instead. And then it writes the query for you, and all you have to do down here is run it. I may as well run it now because I want to show you not anything to do with the results, but I want to show you that when you run a Wikidata query, you can download the results. Down here, it's hidden behind me, so let me scroll down a bit. You can download them as CSV or a number of other formats. You can link to this result if you want to share the query with anybody else. You can also use the URL. The terms of the query are included in the URL, but they're a bit lengthy. And if you want to add other things to the query in terms of once you found that group of objects, tell me more about them, you can add other properties in here. I'm not going to do that right now, but it's quite easy to do. So that was the Wikidata dashboard for theses. We have another one for people, and another one that I've called data quality. That's about including properties that I don't expect to find on the theses, like a volume number or a journal. And that's just to help me see if any items have been inappropriately merged with other items. It happened a couple of times that a thesis got merged with a publication because it had the same title and an author in common. And obviously they shouldn't be merged, they're separate things, but that's just a way for me to make sure that that doesn't happen again. So underneath those property dashboards, we have some Sparql queries to see what the data looks like. So I've written here, this is a map of New Zealand graduates and where they've been employed. It's actually not just graduates. So I've put on the focus list statement on both the authors of the thesis and on the advisors. So just be aware this query is drawing data from both of those and showing what places these people have been employed in around the world. We'll get a map. Here we go, lots of little dots. You can zoom into this. You can click on dots and it will tell you who that is. You can, sometimes the dot is more than one person. And I found, yes, this one's got several, and so on. You can play around with them. You can also, if you want to edit the query to show you something else, you can do things like color coding dots by where people have been educated or maybe where they've submitted their thesis, or you can limit your search to only certain institutions. Feel free to have a play. I did that same query, what's this? So this is an employment one, just for one institution, Lincoln graduates. And I did this so that it will be easier for people who don't know Sparql to adjust the query to their own needs. So this is just the display for Lincoln. If I click Edit Sparql, it will show me the query itself rather than just the results of the query. And here we have educated at, and so I can just change this here. I can start typing in, let's say I want to say, let's go for Massey. And I can select Massey University. And now if I run it with this blue button over here, it'll tell me I've got 1,426 results, and there they are on a map. Obviously, lots of these little dots actually represent more than one person. And if I wanted, I could change this from a map to a table if I wanted a list of the places that people have been employed, and so you can change that and you can download it and you can do other things. So that's how we change the institution in a query to the one that you might be interested in. How do I go back to my, right, here we go. What else do we have? I am not going to run the doctoral advisor student graph, which was that messy graph that was on the PowerPoint slide just now. They make me a bit seasick when I run them. I have to walk away and make up a tea and wait for them to settle down before I can look at them. But feel free to run them yourself. I've done one for the entire project and one for the University of Otago. You can adjust these to be doctoral student and doctoral advisor, or just student and advisor, or both of them together, just because we store doctoral student and doctoral advisor information in separate statements to other kinds of advisors. This one is a bubble chart of the thesis main subjects. I'm quite pleased with this one. There's a lot of work still to do on the main subjects, as I'll talk about a bit later, but it's still quite fun to look at this. If you mouse over it, so you can see the sort of 7,270, there we go, theses with New Zealand as a subject. There's actually many more than that, but there's some changes I need to make to how the keywords are done. So New Zealand is the biggest subject at the moment, then it's Maori, education, environment, and if you mouse over them, you can get the full label, conservation biology, and that is Auckland. And then you can see, this sort of size dot is 20 odd theses, and little ones at the edge are just one thesis that's got a particular main subject. They're almost too small to show up. If you get your mouse in exactly the right place, you can get them to pop up and show you what the subject is. There we go, Dunedin volcano. one thesis on Dunedin volcano. So yes, there's some work I need to do on the main subjects, and that's because a lot of subjects are things like red deer genetics, for instance. That's how it's recorded in our database, but the way Wikidata would really deal with that is red deer as a subject and genetics as a subject. It doesn't actually have an item for red deer genetics. So when I'm coming to match keywords, I'm having to make a decision all the time. Is this a keyword I should split into two and then re-reconcile and match to two different things? Or is this something that there really should be a Wikidata item for? Currently, I'm deferring most of those decisions and just matching the things that easily match. There are a lot of keywords. So there's a lot of decisions to be made about that. Well, here's a fun way of seeing the people. Histropedia timeline. This is not a very sophisticated item at the moment, and I need to get someone who knows more about Histropedia to help me. I would really like to do a timeline of the theses and have them color-coded by the institution that they were submitted to, but also showing a picture of the person that wrote them if we know it. But every time I try and make Histropedia do that, I break it. So this is a relatively simple Histropedia, just adapted from one of the examples. The people are put on the timeline by their year of birth, and they're color-coded by where they were born, which is not uninteresting. So you can zoom in and out. As you zoom in, you'll find more things appear. You can move left and right. And if you want to know more about any of these people, you can double-click on them and go to their Wikidata item. This query here just gives you the image grid of the people. That was my first slide. So that's everybody who's got that on the focus list of statement. That has a picture of Wikidata. There's another query here. I was curious about which museums or collections might have information about our people. It's not a very long list at the moment, but that will grow over time. You can query what awards people have won. This is a nice little query. The longest chain of doctoral students and advisors at the moment is 6. I'll be keeping an eye on that. I expect as we add more advisors, that chain will get longer. Currently it goes back to Marie Clay, who was in education, but that's still a relatively recent thesis. So, you know, in terms of the bigger data set. So I think we could get that back quite a long way as we go on. Having said that, advisor information is something that is missing for a lot of the older theses in our dataset. The similar chain for student and student of, so any thesis that's not a doctoral thesis, is only 2 at the moment, and that's mostly because I've focused on adding doctoral advisors. Other useful links. Oh, I have to show you this dashboard because I think it's something that we should all be quite proud of. So this dashboard is another property dashboard. It was created by the Source Metadata project, which nowadays is called Wikicite. And it's kind of a league table of everybody that's got thesis information in Wikidata. When we started this project, near the beginning of this year, there were 51 New Zealand theses in Wikidata, and the most that any one institution had, and that was University of Auckland, was 12. So we were right down the bottom of this league table. And now I'd just like to point out, University of Oxford has got nearly 17,000 theses, and University of Auckland has 15,000. And then it's Massey, and then it's University of Canterbury. Here's University of Otago, and here's Victoria University of Wellington, and so on. We are now, for New Zealand, we are 9 out of the top 20 institutions in the league table. And I'm personally quite pleased about that. We're also holding our own with main subjects. You know, we've got work to do. We especially have work to do on where theses have been digitized and linking them. but we're not doing badly compared to other people in terms of linking our authors. So, you know, we are representing ourselves internationally quite well, I think. Right, so heading back into the PowerPoint, those were some of the visualizations that we have. I talked a bit about main subjects. We are very much still working on main subjects. If you go back to the page and run the query to get this bubble graph, you can mouse over any of the dots to see how many theses. There are 7,000 and something with New Zealand as a subject. All the little tiny dots around the edge will just be one thesis on a particular subject. But actually, I've got close to 280,000 keywords at the moment, not unique keywords, just entries for keywords. OpenRefine cannot quite deal with telling me how many unique ones there are. I think there's just too many. So far, we have matched all of the 2008 ANSRIC codes. So working with controlled vocabularies, once the vocabulary is matched to Wikidata, it is really, really quick and easy to add those main subjects to the thesis items in Wikidata. So we've done all of the 2020 ones. And this was a lot of hard work by Zibora. We've done a bunch of the 2008 ones, and we've done all the Maori keywords. On top of that, we've done 20,000 of the commonest free text keywords. But yeah, there's a lot to go, and it's complicated by the fact that Wikidata just doesn't deal with main subjects in quite the same way as we have in our data. So for instance, I'm finding a lot of items that something like red deer genetics that I think of as a compound item, because in Wikidata, I would probably store that as an item about red deer and about genetics, and use the combination to find them. So every time I have something like that, that might be a compound term in the data set, I have to make a decision, is that a compound term that Wikidata ought to have and doesn't? Or is it something that I need to split in the data set and match to two different items? So we may end up with 400, 500, 600,000 keywords. We will see. There's a lot of work still to do with these. However, the real advantage in adding main subjects, and as I've been adding them, I was thinking, how is this really helping? And it is helping because of the number of languages that Wikidata is available in. So as soon as we put these main subjects in as Wikidata items instead of text strings, as they are in the repositories and as they are available to Google, now they're searchable in all different languages, 300 plus that Wikidata is available in. So I really hope that this, again, will expose the dissertations to a much wider audience worldwide. Things that I have not engaged with yet in the data, I'm still working on matching degrees to Wikidata items for degrees. I expect to get that done in the next week or two. I have not looked at copyright status and license information yet. I want to. It's just that there's quite a lot of variability in how the different institutions have used those particular columns in DSpace over time, and figure it out. It's just, it's quite complicated. So I need to sit down probably with some experts in how I want that information to look in Wikidata, and then try and match what we've got into the right framework. I also think the data set we've got is going to be really useful for aliases for people. We've got a lot of different forms now of people's names in the OpenRefine project, and that's immensely useful to add to Wikidata, and that will be something I'll do at some point. We do have some tools for improving the data. Many hands absolutely definitely make light work, so we would love some help with using these. The first of these things is a Google Sheet of theses that can be cited on Wikipedia. So this is simply, we've run a search of which thesis have been matched to an author, and does the author have a Wikipedia page? And we can go in there and cite the thesis on the Wikipedia page. There may well be other places that these can be cited, especially if they might be the seminal work on the systematics of a particular insect or whatever. But we're just kind of dealing with the simplest, most straightforward citations at the beginning, and that's putting it on the author page. So there's several hundred pages in the Google Sheet. Do feel free to help. I'm going to show you how to do that in a moment. The other tool we have is a mix and match catalogue, and that's about matching the author name strings to potential author items in Wikidata, and then deciding to create a new one if they're not there. And I just wanted to make a note on this slide that at some point we would love to know whether traffic to university repositories has increased after all this work that hopefully exposes the thesis to a wider audience. I will make a separate video, I think, to show how to cite things on Wikipedia and how to use the mix and match catalogue. We would really love some help with those things. They are relatively short, just a few minutes to do each task. So they fit in quite well. We're doing things like watching TV or listening to music or waiting for a meeting to begin, that kind of thing. And the next thing that we should decide as a group probably is what we're going to do about uploading future data for New Zealand dissertations. So how I or other Wikipedia editors, Wikidata editors can support the group to ensure that that data gets in future. What things can we easily automate to make it as seamless a process as possible? It will always involve, I think, a bit of time cleaning up author names and thesis titles, because the way they're stored in university repositories is not the way we store them in Wikidata. But I do think that after that cleaning's been done, which I can write some pretty good instructions for, I reckon it would be pretty easy to give a JSON recipe that you can whack into Open Refine, and would do most of the rest of the matching and reconciliation for you, and allow people to update a batch, maybe every year, of all the new dissertations with an author name string section statement rather than an author. And we then create a new mix and match each year that people can work on independently to match to the authors. So that's something for us to discuss. And just a quick thank you at the end. Thank you to editors like Deborah and Axel, who've been working hard on things like the citations and matching the control vocabularies, which was a lot of work. And thank you to the Wikimedia Aotearoa New Zealand user group for the data cleaning grant that enabled me to spend a lot of time cleaning up author names and titles and filling in missing information in the dataset. Thank you. So I'm going to show you how to use the mix and match catalogue for the New Zealand Thesis project. You can find this catalogue. I will put a link in the comments for the video or the description or somewhere. You can also find it from the Wikipedia project page. If you scroll down under tasks, there's a link to the Google Sheet for citing and the mix and match tool here. And if you click on this link here, it will take you to the front page of the catalogue. So the way the tool works is I've uploaded a very straightforward spreadsheet with all of the strings, the author name strings from the theses, and then the tool attempts to match those to Wikidata items for people. And then it puts them into various categories, preliminary matched ones that need a human to confirm or refute the match, unmatched ones where I didn't think I could find anyone, fully matched ones, and these have all been checked already by people. And down here you can see matches over time and the different editors who've been working on the catalogue. It's pretty new, so we have a lot of work to do still. You can see there's just under 60,000 name strings to match. Bear in mind this is not 60,000 people, because some people will have done more than one thesis, but it takes a human to decide that John Smith that wrote this thesis is the same as John Smith that wrote the other thesis, right? Let's have a look at the preliminary matched category first. So let me just show you what it's doing. It's taking, this is the name string from the thesis. And if you want to click on this, it will take you to the repository item for the thesis. And here is a summary description of the thesis. This item here is the Wikidata item that the tool thinks might match. And this is for an economist. So you could click on this and find out more, and then you can confirm or remove this match depending on whether what you find matches or not. Let me just show you some ways to move around the catalogue. Sometimes you want to go back to a page you were on before, so you can move around pages by clicking on the numbers here. But you can also, and this was a trick that took me ages to learn, you can also go back to a page by changing the page number and the URL. So I can go straight to this page here if I want to. It might take a second to load. Another way is that you can search a catalogue. So if you think there might be someone in here who did a thesis, you can search only in this catalogue. And let's see, I should say that when it searches within a catalogue, it is only looking at the name strings. It does not search the descriptions, which is a shame. Otherwise, you could use it to bring up all of the University of Canterbury theses or all the big ones or whatever, if you were interested in working on one institution. All right, so having searched for the name Kavanagh, let's take a look at what we might do. It's fairly clear here that someone that died in 1967, this is the Wikidata description, is not going to have been the author of a 2015 doctoral thesis. So let's remove that match. And now that we've removed it, we could go on and do other work if we wanted, or we can attempt to match it. If we just leave it, then the tool will stick that Patrick Kavanagh string into the unmatched category for someone else to try and work on. But if I now search Wikidata, I'll do that in a new tab, we can see if the right Patrick Kavanagh might be there. So the tool always picks up, if there's more than one potential match, it brings back the first one. So just because the match is not the one you want, it doesn't mean that the person you want isn't there. And if I look down this whole string of Patrick Kavanaghs, oh, actually, before I do that, I should just say, this bit up here is specifying that when we search, we only search for humans. So P31 is instance of, and Q5 is human. And that stops the search from bringing back things like biographies and obituaries and stuff. So if we scroll down this list, we're not looking for a poet or a footballer or a police chief, but we are looking for a researcher. And if we click on Patrick H. Kavanagh, well, this doesn't tell us very much, only that he's a researcher and that he has an ORCID. I can click on the ORCID and open up the profile and see if maybe this might be the right person. There's another place I'm going to show you how to look as well. Sometimes ORCID profiles are private. It's going to take a second. Sometimes they're private and you can't get any information, and you wonder, how did this person get a profile in Wikidata when there's nothing attached? And that's because the links are sitting somewhere else. So look, Patrick Kavanagh has a country in New Zealand, and he has publications about seeds on islands. If I go back to the Wikidata, let me just show you where else we might find things. And that's under the tools section on the left-hand side, what links here. And that will show us if he's been linked to any publications in particular on Wikidata. And yes, there are two, one on large seas and islands and another on origins of agriculture. Okay, so let's look back at the thesis. It was on macroevolutionary changes of plants on islands. I think that's likely to be the right person. How do I tell mix and match that I'm the right person? Well, I go to his record, Patrick H. Kavanagh, and I copy this QID. So I've just double clicked it and that selects it. And then I copy and I go back to mix and match and I say Cite Q and I paste it in. And what it does then is mix and match will display me the description and the label and the QID of what I've matched it to. So, maybe I picked up the wrong QID by mistake. I could remove it again if I wasn't happy. Okay, and it successfully matched it. What will happen then? That's all you need to do for that one. And I would come in later on and extract all of the name strings that have been matched in the tool, and I will add all the thesis statements and link authors and theses and institutions they were educated at, and the dates and all that kind of thing outside of the tool, because mix and match can't quite deal with the complexity of matching a thesis to an author as opposed to a person to a person. What else do I need to show you? So imagine we had searched Wikidata for Thomas Richard Kavanagh and he's not there and there's no one that might be him. The other thing you can do with this tool is set a new item. So if you click create item, the tool will create an item. It will say it's a human. It will link to the repository item as a description of the person. It's not ideal, but it's better than nothing. It tells people where the information has come from. And then I will come through later and add the thesis statements. And that's a really useful thing to do. If you search Wikidata and you don't find a record for someone and you're sure they're not there, it's great to create a new item for them because it stops anyone else wasting their time searching for someone who isn't there. And that's pretty much it. It's pretty quick to go through and reject bad matches if that's all you want to do. It's also quite quick to find people and look for them, and it's quite fun. It's a bit of a treasure hunt. Have fun with it. Okay, I think this is the last thing I want to show, and this is how to cite a thesis on Wikipedia. So if you click on the link on the New Zealand Thesis Project Wikipedia page, you can open a Google Sheet. I've done it already just to make it faster. And the front page has some fairly straightforward instructions about how to cite, but it's basically telling you what I'm about to show you now. So let's there's various tabs with lists. Some of them are done, some of them are not. I just didn't want people to be working on one long list and tripping over each other and lots of scrolling up and down. So I've opened up already the page and the Wikidata items for John Warham. You'll see his author Wikidata is here, his Wikipedia article link is here, his thesis Wikidata link is here, and then there's just some extra details here. But it wouldn't matter if all I gave you was the Wikidata item, you'd be able to get to all of them from the Wikidata item. So let's take a look at it here. So you'll see from John Warham's Wikidata item that he has both an English and this is an Esperanto Wikipedia page. I might actually go and try and cite his thesis on there later on. And if all you had was the Wikidata link, you would be able to scroll down and find his thesis here and get to the item that way. So let's take a look at his Wikipedia page. So it's a pretty brief one. It has a little bit of text about him, a bibliography and some references. And this needs a bit of formatting still, but we're not going to worry about that today. So there's a statement here. He did a BSc Hons and a master's degree at Durham, and then he did a PhD thesis at the University of Canterbury on penguins in 1973. Which is great, but it's not supported by a source, right? That is a perfect place for us to cite the thesis to support that evidence about what his thesis was on, and let people then go and read the thesis if they're interested. So the way I'm going to do this, I'm just going to visit the Wikidata item for the thesis, which I could have got to from his item, but I've actually already just got it open. And I'm going to copy this Q number here. I just double click on it and copy. Then I come back to the Wikipedia page and I find where I want to put the citation, which is just after the punctuation. It's a general style. You can see that that's how the other ones work. Now I could just hit the cite button and paste in the QID, and the citoid tool would then extract the information from Wikidata, make the citation for me. But I think of that as a dead citation. It extracts the information once and that's that. I'm actually going to use a slightly different tool called Cite Q. Let's do that now. Insert template and Cite Q. Select it from the list, and then I can paste in the QID. And the way this works is it's going to extract the information now to make the citation, but it will be live. So if the Wikidata item gets updated later, if it gets merged with another one and the QID changes or something, this citation stays live, which is really nice. So what it's done is put in the author name, the year, the title, the repository it's come from, a handle, a DOI, and the Wikidata item, but it's put it all in the text, which obviously we don't want. And I just have to go into, this is called the visual editor on Wikipedia. And if I go up and hit this little pencil up in the top right and switch to source editing, I can do a quick little bit of code to turn it into a reference instead of the text. So I have to scroll down. The hardest bit here is just spotting where it is that you put the citation. But in a short page like this, it shouldn't be too hard. So here we go. Here are the penguins. Here is the Cite Q. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a little ref tag at the front and a slash in the ref tag at the back, and that turns it into a reference. While I'm here, there's another little thing I can do too. I can put a pipe, I can write type, and I can say this is a thesis. You don't have to do this. This is an optional extra to say what type it is. We'll just switch back to visual editing so you can see how it looks. My hope is that one day the Cite Q template will extract that information from Wikidata about what type of thesis something is. But in the meantime, if you want the citation to say that it's a doctoral thesis, and here it does, then you need to put it in yourself. So that's our citation. It links as you would expect. I'm now going to publish it. And I'm going to say adding, or added rather, citation for PhD thesis. Now the other thing I can do, let's just show, right, so that's now published and complete. The other thing I'm going to do is just double check. So this is the Wikidata item for his thesis. And if I click on his handle, I can see whether the thesis has been digitized or not. And if it has, and then I can add that statement to Wikidata, and it will provide a clue on the Wikipedia page to people who know, oh, look at that, it has been digitized. So I'm going to copy that URL, and I'm going to go back to the Wikidata item for the thesis, and I'm going to say full work available at URL, and I'm going to paste in the URL, publish the statement, and that's all I need to do. So now if I go back here, on his Wikipedia page, the citation for the thesis, at the moment, because I haven't refreshed the page yet, is linked to the DOI and the handle, and then to the QID, the Wikidata item at the end. But if I refresh the page now, you should see a change. The title gets linked as well. So if you see that on a Wikipedia reference that has been done with Cite Q, the title is linked, it tells you there's a digitized item behind it, which is quite handy. And that is how to use Cite Q for theses. Sometimes you'll see theses cited in info boxes. There isn't one on this page. Those you can't use the Cite Q template for because it doesn't work in info boxes. But you can still cite the title of a thesis, and you can link it to the repository item with a URL. So yes, we have several hundred of those that we can do for the New Zealand thesis project, and I will be going off to the Esperanto Wikipedia in a minute to see if I can put a citation there. Thank you.